As I live and breathe, he's mine.
Today on Between the Lines, issues mankind faces from survival to morality with the Oscar-winning director Ron Howard. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Ron's films are embedded in our consciousness, from Apollo 13 to his Academy Award-winning A Beautiful Mind. He is one of the world's most beloved filmmakers. Now, with his latest cinematic achievement, In the Heart of the Sea, he challenges us to deal with life's most complex subjects, while at the same time lifting the human spirit, even in the face of unimaginable consequences.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
You don't get a chance to really talk about what's real. And it's the purpose of the movie.
Ron, I cannot tell you the pleasure it is to have you back on Between the Lines. Welcome to the show.
It's great. It's great to see you, Barry. Your show's great, and I'm happy to be here in the library.
I love it. Listen, we're going to start with these words, and I'm going to use them because it's also the words that really come up at the beginning of the film, and I really feel there's a number of major emphasis that are in here, but this is one of them, and here's the words: how does one come to know the unknowable? And in a sense, that simple line permeates throughout the entire film. That's the question.
Well, thank you. I think there's an element of this movie, and there are many things that attracted me to the story. First of all, I was just surprised. I was surprised by the screenplay. I was surprised when I found out that it was based on real events. I had no idea that Moby Dick was inspired by the sinking of the Essex. I didn't know. But as we dug further and further into the project, there became this other theme, more on the character level. And it was about coming to terms, identifying with the truth about oneself and the world around them in a way that they didn't necessarily want to acknowledge. And so those lines that you're referencing came much later. In fact, even in post-production, after the actors, the writers and myself had sort of honed it, shot it, looked at it, and out of it came this notion that a lot of the characters in the movie are forced to come to terms with themselves and their place in the world and the way they've lived and the choices that they've made, and and there's something sort of transformational about going through the gauntlet of an experience like what they went through, after the whale sank.
You don't fool me, Mr. Chase.
Mr. Coffin?
That right?
You put us here. You know you put us here.
Hey! Mr. Coffin, put the pistol down!
Say you're scared!
What are you doing? Mr. Coffin, put the pistol down!
You know what happens when the food and water runs out?
Do as the captain says, Coffin!
I just want to see the landsman
Mr. Coffin, put the pistol down. That's an order!
Do as the captain says, now!
Say it!
Henry.
Say it! Say it!
Henry! Put the pistol down.
You said before all the characters. Melville is one of those characters. Even though he's not a character on the ship or the Essex, he's going through a questioning of the unknown, and a questioning that I believe every creative person can feel. And when I say creative, I always like to share with my viewers, I mean doctors, nurses, everyone who has to think on their feet, from artists to writers to musicians. And that was a fear almost. Everyone is also overcoming fears. And his fear was, what happens if I don't write this? And what happens if I write it and I don't live up to what the story's about?
I thought it was a great opportunity to shed a little bit of light on the anxiety, the fear, abject fear sometimes, that creative people feel when they're trying to make a breakthrough. And I think at the time that he was writing Moby Dick, he had some success, and his career had flattened out, and he didn't quite have the respect of his peers that he dreamed of, and there were things that compelled him to dig deeper, and I think he found the material for that within himself, but also not only in The Whale, but also in what some of the survivors went through.
I'm not a great writer. I'm not Hawthorne. But from my first hearing of it, this tale has haunted me. It consumes me. I fear if I do not write it, then I shall never write again.
What else?
I fear if I do write it, that it will not be as good as it should be.
You know, you said earlier about that exploration of the self. I want to explore a few of those things that come out, and that one is, in particular, is this sense of purpose and mission.
Mm-hmm.
That so many people, I think, don't realize we're all really here with a sense of purpose and mission.
Right.
And what I felt when I left that screening, and with my son and wife we talked about it, was that the viewer himself or herself is also now instilled. You almost have to either find that mission, relate to the mission you really have, appreciate, because that's what this is also about, is one's mission in life.
Well, that's high praise, and it's also you know, missions can transform in a way, and that was something that I was interested in. You put characters under this kind of pressure. You test them in this way, and you know, and that makes interesting drama and kind of human interest storytelling. But you know, when I began to learn about this story again, it surprised me, because on the one hand, it's the origin story for Moby Dick. So as a director, it means there's a mythic quality here, and there's also, you know, sort of classic qualities of seafaring adventures, Joseph Conrad and Melville himself and others, and yet it's a true story. You need to honor that and respect that, and in all of it is both the classic but also the contemporary, because I mean, I kind of should have been able to put it together, but just never did in my life, that was the energy industry. The whaling industry was the energy industry of its time, and greed drove it just as much as markets and the drive for money and power, consume us today. And it was, in its own way, as political, and as significant an engine of the global economy then as it is now, only it involved slaughtering whales. And so that's such a, and when you read Melville, even though he had been on a whaling ships, he was a whaler for a period of time, you sense that there's an undercurrent of understanding or questioning that there is a moral question. There is a moral question to be asked about the whole thing.
To return to port without a single barrel of oil would be a mistake, sir. And not behoove a man whose name is Pollard, or Chase for that matter. And the best thing for both of us would be to work all hours God sends us. Fill this ship with oil and be home inside a year and rid of one another as quickly as possible. Trust me, I am every bit as desirous of that as you.
That's where I want to go, because I believe it is the moral question that is the thing that moves everyone when they see this. And one thing that is unique about this, and you said when I talked about mission, how even that can change. There is no real moral relativism. I don't want anyone to think that, you know, there's clear-cut morality, in my opinion, when you see this film. You see it on a number of levels. I won't go into details, but you see there are two officers, and one of them has a stronger moral character than the other, no matter how you want to look at it. But what I thought was interesting was there was moral fluidity. Not relativism in the sense that, well, someone may think something is good and someone may think something is bad, but like you said about a mission, a person's moral compass can change when they go through a certain struggle. And that was something that was brought out, and it took a very long time for it to come to fruition, but that was also an underpinning philosophy behind this.
Well, Chris Hemsworth, who we worked together on the movie Rush, where he played James Hunt. There was a Formula One race driver, James Hunt. He brought this project to me. When I talked to him about what he loved about it, he also was surprised by the story in a lot of ways, but it wasn't all about the whale and the way the guys were challenged and the physicality. It's not quite what you would expect of Chris necessarily if you didn't know him. He was fascinated by that moral fluidity, as you put it, and the fact that here's a man full of pride. He thinks he knows just what he wants, and is faced to, you know, rethink his values, himself, the way he approaches things, you know, and it was a really, for me, who I like to think of myself as an actor's director, very interesting to hear him articulate that, and then for us to go after it together. I will say that we did not have at our disposal the phrase moral fluidity. That's yours. I'm going to use it though from now on.
I'm honored. Thank you, Ron. Please, I'm very honored. You know, though, I want to bring up this element that through that that's in the film itself, because it has to do, and you mentioned it even when we talked about creativity, courage. Courage plays a very interesting line, and the line that you give it is, or the film gives it, is to go where one does not want to go. That for some reason grabbed me, because oftentimes we think of courageous in a little different form. This is really specific. It's doing what you don't want to do, but you know it must be done.
And you're absorbing some level of personal risk, whether it's physical or emotional. And I like the way this story, as sort of big and epic and cinematic as it is, you know, also incorporates these character opportunities, which is why I think we could get a world-class cast together, you know, around this.
Are you familiar with the story, Mr. Joy?
Sir?
Were you aware that Mr. Chase was effectively orphaned due to his father's incarceration?
Well, we all have our paths to see. As a rule, we tend not to ask too many questions.
Can't have been easy, though. Yet, you had Nantucket's great seafaring family to adopt you.
This is far from the first time I've been called a landsman or an off-islander by some Nantucketer reminding me how I am not a part of that family. Now, if the captain will excuse me, there are whale boats and watches to assign.
The actors really wanted to tell this story. They wanted to get at it. They did their research. In this one, it was really about the fact that we shot a lot at sea, and they had to physically put themselves through a process of losing a lot of weight. And most of the most dramatic scenes were filmed in situations where, you know, you couldn't coddle the actors at all. We were really out there capturing them in, you know, at sea.
It's survival. That's the other big theme. It's what man does for survival. When I spoke to my son Eli, he even said it's also how much humanity we may have to give up for survival. That's what I thought was fascinating, was what a human being could do with what is just around him to survive.
Well, it was really about going out there, facing adversity, failing in a way, facing tragedy, and the fight to get home. And this one, you know, just has this incredible component of this 100-foot sperm whale that is, you know, I mean, the intensity of that counterattack that really occurred, this bull whale attacking the ship and ramming it multiple times, is staggering. I mean, it completely blew the minds of the men of the Essex. They, you know, what was turning on them? Was it God? Was it evil? Had they, you know, was it? They knew that these beasts were, you know, were dangerous and occasionally could kill, but they'd never experienced a whale turning on them with that kind of blatant act of vengeance, or at least that's what it certainly felt like for them.
What was that, Mr. Lawrence?
Mr. Chief!
God damn it. Find Mr. Lawrence!
You see when the character that Chris plays and that whale, when they meet literally eye to eye, there's so many different questions that must be going through his mind, and you see it in both their eyes.
Well, thank you. That was, you know, a feat and a real staging challenge. There were a lot of directorial challenges in the movie, not only guiding the cast and leading them, and necessarily being a little tough on them, if, you know, in terms of making sure that the physical challenges were met. But there was also this blending of absolute realism with enough intensity and sort of big screen cinematic, I don't know, bravura or imagery, that you also feel that this can be the birth of a mythical character, of Moby Dick, and without betraying the authenticity. And so it was a really dense story underneath a very simple narrative thread. So I think this movie, while keeping up its pace, keeping up its drive, having the adventure, having the whale, still offers a kind of a thematic density.
Well, you know, you talk about the density and the multiple characters that come out. One that we haven't mentioned yet, the sea itself. The sea's dark secrets, those are words in the film, and this. And it has to do with man's dark secrets. The devil loves unspoken secrets. It festers in the soul. And in my conversation with Eli, he said, silence speaks so loud. And you can see the tortured souls on so many levels.
Yeah.
It's almost as if every character has, and the sea itself and the whale itself, has to deal with this tortured soul that's within.
I believe it would do you good to talk to the man.
No.
You listen well. Who holds this place together while you drink yourself to death? You will talk with this man as much as is necessary to keep the money. You know our circumstances, Thomas.
Only as much as is necessary.
here they are enduring this, you know, this survival drama, this going through this nightmare, and when you read the journals of the survivors, they had to look inward because they couldn't believe they were finding themselves in this situation, and they had to believe there was a reason. There was guilt, there was anger, and a supernatural sense of what the whale, you know, wanted from them, or why the whale would attack them, and so all these things informed what I was trying to do with the scenes, and we had. You know, in addition to Charles Levitt, who, you know, the screenwriter, also uncredited, Peter Morgan, who had worked with on Rush and Frost Nixon, did some scene work and some writing on it. So did another fine writer, John Lee Hancock, all in support of a story that they really believed in and trying to get at those, you know, those possibilities for the characters and the themes.
But in a certain sense, as dark as the sentiments of some of the scenes, of some of the film in a sense is, you leave uplifted in spirit. And I realized it almost right away. I thought, why am I feeling so good after seeing this film? And I began to really ponder and said, it is because within us the spirit of mankind survives.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm so glad you feel that way about it, Barry. We did, and that was certainly the aim. And it's you know, and again, it is a lot about transformation, not only in the story of the Essex, but also you know, in our narrative bridge, you know, with Melville and the last survivor, Nickerson. That there's a, you know, sense of journey and passage, and that there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of pain, there's loss, but through it comes a new truth and a new understanding and a possibility to share that and grow from it.
And you use a term that is very familiar with the people, and especially at sea. And just as we tied in Melville's courage as just being a writer with the same courage as these men at sea, I believe that the word any port in the storm is important.
Now this white whale, did he dance a jig and pick your pocket as well?
Gracias.
You believe that?
If we set sail now, catch the southeasterlies at their best time, fill our belly, we could be home in 6 months. And say you missed the chase. No need to endure our predicament for a moment longer than necessary.
Amen to that.
You see that for them, obviously, any port, even for the respite it gives. Right. But I always even used it when it came to our own emotional beings. Sometimes we as individuals must grab hold of any port when we're in our emotional storms.
Well, it's when you read Nickerson's journal, and in our movie, Nickerson is played by Brendan Gleeson, the senior Nickerson, and then his younger self, it was the cabin boy, Tom Holland, plays him. Tom Holland's going to be the new Spider-Man, by the way. Really great young actor, fantastic. He was a Billy Elliot, one of the Billy Elliots on stage in England. Great, really talented guy. Anyway, it's interesting when you read the journal because the character that Chris Hemsworth plays, Owen Chase, terrified him, and he felt he was a brute, and you know, kind of like you'd think of a drill instructor or something in the military, that kind of a leader, and yet looked up to him and depended on Owen Chase so much, and changed his whole point of view about Owen Chase during the ordeal of the survival after the attack of the whale. And so again, I tried to build upon that, and that's sort of that notion of any port in a storm, or of an unexpected relationship changing and becoming, you know, from fear to dependence and respect.
And with that, our time is up, so I'm going to actually end. How did you know this? You lead me so beautifully, Ron. I'm going to end with Melville's words to the older cabin boy who's telling the story, and he says, "The strength of that boy still lives in you." Thank you, Ron, for showing the strength of this film to us today.
Thank you, Barry. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to talk to you, as always.
It's a pleasure for me and for my crew, staff, and family. And thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Ron leaves, I'd just like to leave you with these few words that started our show and the film In the Heart of the Sea. And it goes like this: how does one come to know the unknowable? I'm Barry Kibrick. We may never know the unknowable, but the search between all that is known draws us closer each day to the possibility. Thank you so much, Ron.
Beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Closed captioning for Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible by your generous contributions to KLCS Education Foundation. Thank you for your support. To connect with Barry, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, watch past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com.